Hello and welcome to the Fit News Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Shaver, and joining me today is Melissa Merkle. Melissa is a dedicated health and wellness professional with a passion for building community and true connection. With over 2 decades of expertise in the health and fitness industry, she's on a mission to empower women through well-being. From her early days in gym management to working closely with NPC and IFBB fitness competitors, Melissa has cultivated a rich background. She proudly served as the CEO of Boomers in Motion, a renowned senior fitness brand, and director of partnerships at Muscle Mix Music. As a multi-passionate health and fitness authority, Melissa extends her impact through online health coaching programs, catering to both individuals and businesses. Her approach transcends traditional fitness models, focusing on holistic well-being and fostering collective strength within her community. She believes that the magic of ultimate well-being happens when 2 or more beautiful souls connect, and she invites you to be a part of this transformative journey inside of her Facebook group, the Wellbeing Circle for Women with Melissa Merkle. And the link for that group will be in the show notes, so be sure to check it out. Melissa, thank you for joining us today on the Fit News Podcast. I'm excited to get to chat with you.
Hi, Jen. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we have a lot to get to today. So let's get right to it. Where do you want to start? Let's start wherever you want to start, because that's where we should begin.
Perfect.
What do you think?
Perfect. I think that's great. I feel
All
like my bio was long enough that people know
right. Right?
the more that they probably want to know about me. So let's jump in. So today we are really going to talk about how to eat to balance your hormones for ultimate health and for weight loss. That is, the weight loss space has really been a big part of my journey. I struggled with my weight from a very early age, which is what got me into fitness and health and well-being to start with.
Right.
And so a lot of my focus is around, of course, eating for weight loss, but ultimately your health, because I don't really care about the number on the scale. I just want people to be healthy. And balancing our hormones through food is a big part of that. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're really going to focus on 4 main hormones. Now, of course, there are so many more in our body. They are regulating everything. So, Jen, I like to think, and I don't know if you've ever thought this way, but I like to think of our bodies as like giant chemistry experiments. And thinking back into like chemistry class when you had the test tubes and you would like pour something in and then like things would like, bubble up, or maybe they wouldn't. Like that's what's happening in our bodies all the time, all of these chemical reactions. And sometimes when you put things in, you have like these big, like, the test tube flows over and sometimes it doesn't. But our hormones are a big part of that whole chemistry project going on.
Right.
And so go.
I think the other thing is that I don't think that people really understand the importance of food when it comes to our hormones.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't understand that relationship that food has with the hormones.
Yes, I agree. And I hope by the end of our conversation today, some of that gets opened up or expand upon so that it does bring some of that awareness, because it makes a huge, huge impact, because what we eat, as well as what we think and a lot of other factors, it contributes to what is happening in our body, especially with our hormones.
Yeah, it's all part of the chemistry project, or the experiment, right?
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely. And so today like I said, there's a lot of hormones. We're going to talk about 4 in particular. We're going to talk about insulin. We're going to talk about leptin, ghrelin, and cortisol. All right. So those are the 4 that we're going to touch on the most today. And to understand this relationship between our hormones and what we eat, we really have to get a good understanding of our blood sugar and what happens when we eat.
Right.
So let's start by talking about what happens when we eat foods that are high in a sugar or flour content. So when we eat those foods, come into our body, get digested, and the sugar or glucose means the same thing, goes into our bloodstream. And so when we eat foods that are high in sugar, high in flour, over processed, our blood sugar spikes way up. And what happens is when our blood sugar spikes up, it crashes down just as quickly.
Yeah.
So the way this might look in like real life, let's say we start our day, our breakfast, with a bowl of cereal, which a lot of cereals are very high in sugar.
Right.
We have our bowl of cereal and a glass of orange juice, which also many juices are very high in sugar. All of the fiber from the orange juice has been taken out, and a lot of times there's been sugar added in. So cereal, orange juice, start the day, spikes our blood sugar, it crashes down. And then mid-morning, maybe we reach for a granola bar, which again, granola bars are really tricky because a lot of them are marketed as health food.
Oh yeah.
And and when you start to really become a detective and look at those labels and understand, and this gets tricky too because there are so many different names for sugar on labels. So it's not like it just says sugar. Sometimes it does, but there's a high fructose corn syrup and molasses and rice syrup and all of these other names. Anyways, we eat that granola bar. Again, our blood sugar spikes up, crashes down. For lunch, maybe we have a sandwich with potato chips. Again, spike up, spike down. Mid-afternoon candy bar, up, down, up, down. So for a lot of us, our blood sugar is having those drastic ups and those drastic downs all throughout the day. So how does that relate to hormones? When our blood sugar spikes up, our body releases insulin. So insulin is, again, one of the most important hormones when it comes to regulating our hormones through food. It's also considered the fat storage hormone. And what happens? Blood sugar goes up, our body releases insulin. And insulin's job is really to take that glucose, that blood sugar, and shuttle it into the cells. So some of it can go into our muscles, a small amount can go into our liver, but once those places, those reserves are full, the rest of it gets stored in our fat cells. So again, insulin is a fat storage hormone. And when there's insulin in your blood, you can't lose weight because its job is really to take that sugar again, put it in your cells, not release the fat from your cells. So again, what this looks like, you have your cereal and your orange juice. Blood sugar goes up, insulin. You have your granola bar, blood sugar up, insulin. Your sandwich and potato chips, insulin. And so a lot of us have insulin in our blood all day long. And again, that is keeping us from losing weight if that is your goal, but it's also promoting that fat storage. But insulin's a little bit more complicated even than that because insulin triggers our other hormones, leptin and ghrelin, which are those other two. And those two actually regulate our hunger. And so leptin is the hormone that that makes us feel full. And so that's our full feeling hormone. And ghrelin is the one that makes us feel hungry. So ghrelin is actually in our stomach. And when our stomach starts to growl because we're hungry, that is ghrelin making noise. And so again, it's this balance of hormones. And what happens when our insulin is off or it's high all of the time, again, it's influencing these other hormones. So with leptin, you are not necessarily going to feel full, even though you've just eaten all of this other food. Or you're going to start to get hungrier when you have just had something to eat. That's why, like, when you drink, let's say like a soda, let's say you drink a Coke or something like that, might be 300 calories. Again, it's going to spike your blood sugar, trigger that insulin. It's going to drop down really fast, but it's not going to fill you up. Like, you're still going to be hungry.
Yep.
So it all plays a role. Again, insulin is a key factor in so much of this equation.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So insulin is a big one.
Yeah. It's and there's so many people that are struggling with insulin resistance, particularly midlife women.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. When our insulin levels are high all of the time, our body starts to resist it because it's overwhelmed and almost desensitized to these insulin levels.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's move on to cortisol now. And cortisol is a little bit different because cortisol is what is considered our stress hormone. So it's not as triggered with food, it's triggered more with stress. And so many of us think that stress is a bad thing. And actually, stress is not in and of itself bad. It's actually very healthy. It definitely serves purpose when we are in danger and we get stressed, and then we relax. And that's okay when we have that relaxation space. It can actually build our resiliency. Get stressed, relax. Stress, relax. So it actually helps us grow, and our bodies were meant for that. Now, again, the problem with stress is that most of us, or a lot of us in this day and age, we don't take that rest period. We're not good at rest, especially women who are busy working, raising their family, taking care of loved ones, maybe parents, on the go all of the time. Rest is really hard for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when we're stressed, our cortisol increases, and adrenaline is actually the other hormone really associated with stress. But for our purposes, we're really going to look at cortisol. So when we're stressed all of the time, our cortisol levels are high all of the time too. And when our cortisol levels are high, it actually causes our blood sugar to increase. So we were just talking that your blood sugar increases when you eat like a piece of cake, your blood sugar is going to go up, or it's going to go up when you're stressed and you don't get to enjoy the cake. So it's like,
but the problem is that if you're stressed and you're having the cake, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like a double, triple whammy for sure, which happens so much of the time, right? There are so many of us are stress eaters. We feel that feeling and we want to numb it or get rid of it. And so we use food to try to do that. So not only, yes, is your cortisol levels high, you're also eating on top of that. So your blood sugar is really through the roof. And as we've just learned, when our blood sugar goes up, we get that hit of insulin, fat storage, messing up all of those other hunger hormones as well. So it's really like this, a greater impact. And what's also interesting, but also frustrating, is that research shows that when you have cortisol and insulin in your blood, that leads to more belly fat. And so that is a key piece too, especially in women as we age, and our other hormones start to trigger some of that as well. But having the stress with the cortisol and the insulin, and then having it come around our midsection, none of us want that for health reasons, but also for our confidence and how we feel about ourselves, because nobody feels good when they have that going on.
Right. But I mean, it definitely, the visceral fat we know poses a danger to many chronic diseases, which obviously no one wants to have a chronic disease, right? But there are things that we can do.
Yep, absolutely. So let's let's move into really what we need to do with food in order to balance them out. Now that we have a basic understanding of some of the hormones that are at play and what triggers them. So when we are looking at food and how to eat, really our goal is to eat in a way that it stabilizes our blood sugar. So instead of having these ups and downs, our blood sugar is more consistent with just small little waves, because it is going to go up, it is going to go down. You're not going to not have that. We just don't want it to be as drastic. So that's really the goal with eating. And so I've got 4 simple steps to how to eat then to stabilize your blood sugar in order to balance out your hormones. And the first one is really to eliminate as much processed food as possible. And so what does that mean? That means eating whole foods that your great grandmother would recognize as food too. Right. Like there's so many things on the market, and even things that are marketed as healthy foods, they're still processed, and they still, again, thinking of our body as a chemistry project or experiment, the food elements or the ingredients, they're still triggering different chemical reactions in our body. And things, even like diet soda, right? Like we look at, let's say, a Diet Coke and we're like, oh, it doesn't have any calories, this is great. But the thing is, it's still impacting your hormones because the artificial sweeteners hit at a different way. So the best you can do is to ditch the processed food and just eat whole, real foods. And if you can do that, that is like so amazing for you and your health.
And and I think if somebody's listening to this and they say, well, there's no way I could do that, I think the best place to start would be to say, well, what are just a few things, right? Like, let's start small, right? So let's say, what can I take out today and what can I replace it with? So instead of looking at also, well, I'm not going to get to have this. Well, let's look at the things that you can have and what can you replace whatever it was you were eating? What can you replace those Cheetos with, right? And then also making sure that you're not saying they're banned for life, right? But maybe saying, instead of having those every day at 3:00, I'm going to have them, let's start with just twice a week and then slowly wean yourself down to less, right? To where you understand the difference between, having them every day and every just once in a while.
For sure. And it's not about being perfect all of the time and never having these foods, especially some of them, if they are your favorite foods, like it's not realistic to never have them. But even one example of kind of a swap out is, again, let's say that granola bar. And again, some granola bars are better than others as well. But if you carry that around with you, let's say in your purse as a snack when you're on the run, which is something that I used to do all of the time. And this is a swap that I've recently made. So instead of having that, how about you carry an apple with like a little bag of almonds? It still doesn't take up that much room in your purse. And it's, again, just removing that one processed item thing.
And it makes such a big difference. And again, we're not advocating you go into your pantry and throw everything out in one night. Start small, because you don't want it to be overwhelming. We want it to become part of your life. So, are there going to be days when, maybe you forgot to pack your apple and your almonds? But that's okay. Go with, what you're doing most of the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And are there going to be days and are there going to be times that you have to get something like it's not an all or nothing approach, like you're saying. You make the best decisions that you can in the moment. And and feel proud of yourself for
Right.
that.
Right.
Because sometimes too, you're in situations where there's not a best, or there's
Right.
not necessarily an option that is like
Yeah.
even what you want, even if it's top of your mind and you're trying your hardest to
Yeah.
eat as clean as possible and eat
Hmm.
those whole foods, there are going to be circumstances where you just can't.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That doesn't
Yep.
mean that you've fallen off the wagon or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the second part of this too, and this plays into this whole idea too, is that sometimes you can't eat necessarily in the ideal way that you would like. But the
Hmm.
second idea is to really eat a balanced diet.
Hmm.
And so what that means is that you have some protein, you have some fat, and you have some carbohydrates. Because
Hmm.
as we've been talking a lot about blood sugar. And so what raises blood sugar is carbohydrates.
Hmm.
But not all carbs raise your blood sugar in the same way.
Right.
Again, the ones that are more highly processed sugars, processed flours,
Hmm.
they spike your blood sugar the most. However, when you eat foods that are a carbohydrate, when you eat them at the same time as you eat protein and fat,
Hmm.
those foods actually help to balance it out some. It like buffers the impact of the sugar,
Hmm.
especially if you eat the proteins and the fats and vegetables. If you eat those foods first
Hmm.
and then have your carbohydrates towards the end of the meal,
Right.
again, those other foods are going to lessen what they call the glycemic load, or
Right.
that the load that the glucose
Yeah.
plays in how much it
Yeah.
spikes.
Yeah.
So really having that balanced diet.
Hmm.
And some people will say, well, why eat carbs anyways? Because there's so many diets out there, keto,
Yeah.
Atkins,
Yeah.
and all of the very low carbohydrate diets.
Yeah.
And to their point, it's a fair question, because when you don't have those carbohydrates, your blood sugar is more balanced, which is why those diets are effective.
Hmm.
But when you don't eat any carbohydrates, you're missing out on a lot of nutrients. And it
Hmm.
actually brings us to kind of my third point around how to eat. And that is that you want to be eating fiber.
Yes.
And fiber is found in carbohydrates. And fiber is so very, very important. And that is why I don't follow or don't recommend
Yeah.
giving up carbs altogether, because
Yeah.
you are missing out on this fiber and on these nutrients.
Hmm.
And fiber is really interesting because it does a couple things. So, first of all, fiber actually, like, again, helps to regulate that blood sugar so you don't have those big spikes. So it helps with that.
Hmm.
Fiber also helps so much with our gut health.
Yeah.
And gut health has been a very popular topic, as you know,
Yeah.
recently. But just a quick little, like, 2 minute little lesson on gut health. Our digestive tract and our gut is home to, I don't even know how many millions and probably billions of bacteria.
Yeah.
What we don't realize is that as humans, we have more bacteria living on and in our body than we have human cells.
Yeah.
And we don't realize these bacteria, they're living things, and we think that bacteria is bad, but
Hmm.
there's a lot of really healthy bacteria on us, and we wouldn't be able to survive without it. There's so
Right.
many.
Yeah.
But there's a very high concentration in our digestive tract and again in our gut. These bacteria, again, they're living, and so they need to eat something. And what they eat, so the bacteria itself are called probiotics. So when you hear that word
Hmm.
probiotics is actually those living bacteria inside us. What they eat is prebiotics. So prebiotics is the food for the probiotics. And prebiotics are fiber. So bringing this all together here, it's really important for us to eat fiber
Hmm.
because that is feeding this healthy bacteria within our gut. And fun fact, about 80% of our immune system is located within our gut.
Yeah.
And so to keep yourself healthy and to keep a strong immune system, it's so important to keep a healthy gut, and fiber is imperative for that.
Right. Yeah. And I think between the protein and the fiber, those are two areas that many women in particular tend to struggle with. And if we could just dial those two things in, they would see, such a difference in how they're feeling day to day. They would see a difference in their cravings. They would see a difference in their weight.
Yes.
By dialing in on those two things in particular, and managing their plate and prioritizing the protein on the plate and prioritizing that fiber on the plate. And those two things, if you're going to focus on something in this new year, focus on those two things. Don't worry about your calories, focus on your protein, focus on your fiber, getting enough of those. And, you're going to win the year.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about some high fiber foods, because when we're talking about adding fiber, what does that look like?
Right.
And beans and lentils have a ton of fiber. And now a lot of people are probably like, oh, that's so gross, I'm not eating those. That's fine. Vegetables are another great source. Some fruits also have fiber in them. A good rule of thumb when you are looking at labels too, which of course, if you are trying to steer clear of processed foods, you might not find as many labels, right? Because like an apple doesn't have a label on it. But if you are looking at something with a label, a good rule of thumb is to look for something that has 3 grams of fiber or more in it. Some other things too, nuts have a good amount of fiber. Chia seeds are also great. So if you're someone who makes smoothies in the morning, let's say, throw some chia seeds in there, because again, it's just going to boost up your fiber. Throw in some spinach. Throw in what are some other things that
raspberries
have fiber?
Raspberries have
Thank
fiber.
you.
Avocado actually has a lot of fiber as well.
Yes.
So,
and avocados are fantastic in smoothies.
Yes.
Oh, they're so good. Make them nice and creamy. So
you get your healthy fat and your fiber.
Yes, absolutely. And those things are, again, they're really going to help to balance your blood sugar, but balancing your cravings, because that is a big thing too. And Jen, I know I recently saw an article, and I think you saw it too, that was talking about some of the weight loss drugs that are on the market these days. And they were looking at the hormones that these drugs are impacting. And there is a class of hormones called GLP-1s, and those hormones also impact your hunger and your cravings. And so a lot of the drugs on the market these days, that's what they're targeting, right? Because if you're not hungry, the idea is you're not going to eat as much. And what they were discussing in this article is that you can get some of those same things happening from the weight loss drugs with food, and particularly with fiber. And so if you are not wanting to go on a weight loss drug and you're trying to lose weight, fiber is key, again, for so many reasons.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it just has so many benefits that it's important that if you're not getting enough of it now, that you start to investigate and make sure that you start to get it.
And just start by becoming aware.
Right.
Even kind of going through, there have been times when I'm like, I wonder how much fiber I'm getting. Because even when you know that you should get it, sometimes you don't really know what you're getting. And I believe the recommended amount for women is 25 grams a day. Do you know, is that what
25 to 30? Yeah.
Okay.
So it's I guess that's something we should mention. So the first place to start would be, hey, let me look at the fiber I'm getting now, right? Because if you don't know, this is a number. These are the numbers we want to know. In fact, I would say, instead of looking at your scale every morning,
Yes.
the numbers that you want to know are, how much protein am I getting in a day? And how much fiber am I getting in a day? And then once you know that, you can move on from there in striving to get the recommended amount.
Yes. I love that. Those numbers are
Those are
so
the
much,
important.
so much better, so much more motivating
and more
to
valuable.
look at. Yes. Yes. And those are the numbers that are really impacting your health. And you might be surprised, especially with the fiber number. I know I was when I first calculated, because you know, I thought that I was eating pretty healthy, which I was. But then it's like, oh, 25 grams. It's like, it's a good number. It's a good number.
It is. But once you figure it out, and once you know, really what I tell ladies is that look for your fiber sources that you enjoy, and then how can you incorporate those regularly into your day?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then the last step, and we're not going to spend too much time on this last one when we're talking again about stabilizing our blood sugar, is this idea of intermittent fasting. And again, this has gotten a lot of attention recently, and I will be honest, I steered clear of it for a really, really long time, for the reason that personally, I struggled with some eating disorders when I was younger, from a few different places, from both very much restricting my food to later on it turning to binging. And I had the fear that if I started implementing intermittent fasting, it would trigger some of those issues and would lead to binging and more issues that were not really healthy. And what I learned is that there's not just one way to do intermittent fasting. There's over 100 different ways that you can do it. And there's different research for different ways. But one thing that has worked very well for a number of clients I've worked with, and myself personally, is to do a 12-hour fast. And so basically what that looks like is you eat dinner and you make that the last thing you eat for the day. And then you don't eat again until breakfast. And even that 12-hour window, it gives your body a chance to rest and not always be digesting the food and always working. And it's actually, for me, given me a lot more freedom, because during the hours that I am eating, I don't feel as restricted during those hours that I had before. And so again, there's different people will say different things as far as you should fast for 14 hours or you should only eat 2 meals. Again, there's so many different ways to do it, but even just stopping eating after dinner and then waiting until breakfast can make a huge impact.
Yeah. Perfect. So we had, let's just review, we had eliminate processed foods. Number 1, we had eat a balanced diet. So adding our protein, carbs, and fat, eating our fiber. And number 4 was intermittent fasting, correct? Yes.
Those are the 4
things.
Those
are great.
And one little bonus thing just to throw in, because we did talk about our stress and we talked about cortisol. And again, that is not as impacted by food as some of these other hormones like insulin, but practicing just a minute of deep breathing can really, really help to bring those cortisol levels down and relax you and center you as well. And sometimes when you are stressed, especially if you are a stress eater and you tend to turn to food, if you can do some deep breathing for even just a minute, it can help center you so that you, in those moments, can make different decisions as well. So eliminating some of those like 1-2 punches that we were talking about with the cortisol and the extra food and everything like that.
Well, Melissa, those were all great tips. Is there anything else that we missed?
No, I'm sure we could go on for a long time. more and deeper into all of this, but I think this is a really
Yeah.
great overview. And
Mhm.
with this information alone, you can really take these steps and start implementing them right away. Again,
Right.
looking at how much fiber you're getting,
Mhm.
looking at what you are eating, and are you eating something that is primarily carbohydrate? And
Mhm.
if so, maybe could you add something to that meal? If you don't want to give it up, could you actually add something to it
Right.
to help to regulate that blood sugar? And just becoming more aware of
Mhm.
some of the science and the chemistry that's going on in your body. Because once you
Right.
have a better understanding of that, at least I have found this for myself, once you know a little bit more about what's happening in there,
Mhm.
you can make more informed decisions that are science based and not as emotional,
Right.
which for a lot of us, eating and food does become emotional.
Right. Right. I think that's a great
Mhm.
point, and I think that's a great starting point as well, is the awareness component, and
Mhm.
starting with just being aware of what you're putting in your mouth, right? Not
Yeah.
mindless eating.
Yeah.
And I think if you just start there and don't make any other changes, but you just become mindful the
Exactly.
next time you go to eat, just mindfulness on what am I eating, what is on my plate, and do I have a protein, do I have a carb, and do I have a fat, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And start there, and then move on, as you feel ready, move
Yep.
on to, okay, now I'm going to look at how much protein do I have, how much fiber do I have. But I think,
Yeah.
like you said, that awareness is such a key component, because you and I can sit here and tell them, okay, here's a breakfast for you that's 30 grams of protein and 12 grams of fiber. But until they're actually aware of what they're eating now and how it makes them feel, and then the difference in what the
Yeah.
protein and the fiber makes them feel like, you're not going to make that connection. You're not going to be you're not going to stick to it, right? It's not going to be sustainable. It's just a box that you're checking off, and that box down the road, when life begins to life,
Yes.
nobody wants to check the box off anymore.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And you bring up a really good point. Sometimes dialing it back,
Yeah.
just asking yourself two questions before you eat.
Hmm.
Am I hungry? And becoming aware,
Yep.
again, that mindfulness piece of what's going on in your body. Am I
Uh-huh.
hungry? And then, is this healthy? And sometimes we get confused by what's healthy with all of the marketing that's going
Yeah.
on these days.
Hmm.
But at the same time, just asking yourself that question, because we all know that eating, I'm going back to my apple example, but eating an apple is going to be better than eating ice cream, right?
Right.
And so just starting there, and then as you start to practice that, then starting to dial in some of these other components
Hmm.
as well. Because it can be very overwhelming figuring out
Right.
all of the macronutrients, like
Yeah.
this many grams of protein, this many grams of this. And
Right.
and to be honest, I followed some very, very strict plans for a while when I had competed in fitness competitions. And at
Yeah.
that time, all of my food was measured out to the ounce for
Yeah.
like 16, 20 weeks leading up to the competition. And so I was very aware of everything.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do that forever.
Right.
You don't have
Right.
to do that ever
Right.
if you really become in tune with your body and aware of
Exactly.
what's going on, and just a general understanding of what's
Hmm.
happening.
Yeah.
Because yeah, looking at all the numbers can be very overwhelming for some people.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Well, I have enjoyed it so much, Jen. Thank you so much for having me. I'm
Of
honored to be a guest with you.
course. Of course. Well, thank you for listening to the Fit News podcast, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.